The worldwide situation is escalating. The war in Ukraine triggered an accelerated crisis all over the world. In this video, we will talk about the war in Ukraine, ICBM launches on the Korean Peninsula, protests in Iran, and a possible escalation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Also, the fallout of Russia's invasion in the energy markets and economy, and why this is all just a pre-stage for some bigger conflict. It should be clear for everyone that we are at the beginning of a turning point in history. The world will change. Don't fall for the normalcy bias. We are in World War III. It's just different than you think. Welcome to Dark New World. Crises everywhere. It's getting crowded in the headlines at the moment. 8 months after the start of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, other conflicts are flaring up. Some are new, some are decades old, but all of them are dangerous. People might think that calling it the beginning of World War III is overdramatic, but just because we never believed that we could see such a scenario ourselves. Resource depletion, the energy crisis, failing markets and the looming dread of nuclear war is keeping us all awake at night. Let's talk about the conflict spots and answer the question, are they part of something bigger? But the war in Ukraine is still the biggest threat to all of us right now. A Moscow-installed official in the Kherson region has indicated Russian troops might pull back from the west bank of the Dnieper River. But as the United States sounded an optimistic note on Ukraine's ability to retake the strategically important southern city of Kherson, Kiev was more wary. This area includes Kherson city, the capital of the region of the same name, and the only major Ukrainian city captured intact since Russia invaded the country 8 months ago. It also includes one side of a dam across the Dnieper, which controls the water supply to irrigate Crimea, the Ukrainian peninsula Russia seized and later annexed in 2014. Currently, the Russian military are creating pressure on the Ukrainian public through mass drone attacks on electricity supplies to major cities. This is creating shortages of gas and electricity, as well as putting pressure on electrically powered public transport networks. On October 31st, the mayor of Kiev said that 80% of the population were without running water because a pumping station had been bombed. Kiev and Kharkiv has reduced the number of electricity-dependent metro services to petrol and diesel equivalents to reduce the pressure on the grid. With the winter coming, Kiev will be struggling with keeping the lights on if Russian forces continue to attack the power grid in western and central Ukraine. At the same time, it seems like the momentum is on the Ukrainian side in the Kherson region. But winter will slow down any advances and will give both parties time to reorganize. Moscow will have the time to introduce the new mobilized recruits into the army and stage new attacks in spring. On the other hand, Ukraine wants to liberate Kherson city and anything west of the Dnieper River to have a strong defensive position. Now here are some very interesting news. The Russian army seems to import Iranian weapon systems to use them in Ukraine. From Iranian drones to missile systems, weapons trade with Iran seems to be at an all-time high. At the same time, the regime in Iran is struggling with protests in the country. Why is Russia using Iranian drones in Ukraine? Iran is under heavy sanctions for decades now, and is also not known to be a cutting-edge weapon manufacturer. The Russian military complex seems to be completely broken. But before the invasion, no one would have thought that Russia needs to rely on Iranian drones to fight a war in front of its doorstep against a small military like the Ukrainian one. And the Iranians don't give away the drones for free. Although Russia was an Iranian ally for years, the regime in Tehran is using the situation to get access to technology that it couldn't secure in different conditions. For example, Russia and Iran are gradually expanding their cooperation in space, but doing so without much coverage. Last August, a Russian-built remote sensing satellite for Iran was launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, and 3 more are expected to follow in the coming years. There is also compelling evidence that the Russian company is building a communication satellite for Iran that will be placed into geostationary orbit in 2024. Russia's efforts to keep the details of these projects on the wraps, though, have been largely ineffective. Now, as of writing this video, the Saudi government has reportedly shared intelligence with the Biden administration that there are preparations underway for an imminent Iranian attack against their country. If this is true, we could head into a very dangerous situation. If both Saudi Arabia and Iran get dragged into a conflict, 3 major oil producers would be at war. In this case, the global economy would tank and power outages would occur worldwide. But this doesn't have to be true. It could be the case that Riyadh is trying to secure more US defense funding and drag the United States into the conflict. But the ties between Washington and Riyadh are not the best at the moment. Earlier this year, the OPEC countries decided to cut production to raise oil prices. This angered Washington, where policymakers are re-evaluating the relationship to the kingdom. Losing Iran, Saudi Arabia and Russia as oil and gas suppliers would be devastating for the world. There would be a 100% guarantee that the world would head into a war. So the best case scenario is that Riyadh is overestimating the threat from Iran. And as these threats are not enough, we have tensions on the Korean Peninsula. The tensions on the islands began rising when Vigilant Storm joint military drills began between the United States and South Korea, involving hundreds of aircraft and thousands of service members from both countries, according to the US. North Korea accused the Allies of provocative action and launched 23 missiles from its east and west coast, the most missiles it fired in a single day, into waters either side of the peninsula, prompting Seoul to respond with 3 surface-to-air missiles. North Korea is deliberately ramping up tensions with its neighbor. Analysts think it is building to something bigger, such as a nuclear test, or a full long-range ballistic missile test out into the Pacific, or both. There is a political objective to all this noise. It's a pattern Pyongyang used in 2010 and again in 2017. First, ramp up tensions to a frightening level, then call for engagement and concessions from South Korea, Japan and the United States. Pyongyang is almost certainly doing the same again now. But Mr. Kim has a second objective. The North is still far from perfecting its missile technology. After the missile is launched into space, the warhead separates and comes back towards Earth in a re-entry vehicle. This must be able to withstand the enormous heat and pressure generated as it plunges through the atmosphere. In previous tests, it appears that North Korea's re-entry vehicles have failed, so Pyongyang needs to keep on testing to perfect its technology. Worldwide military spending is through the roof. The question remains if the governments of the world are preparing for something bigger. If you want to see a video about this topic, let me know it in the comments below. The Iran protests are still strong and ongoing. If you want to know more about the situation, then check out the video on the left, and on the right, we talk about a direct World War III scenario. If you want to see more, then like the video and subscribe. My name is Dennis, thank you for watching and goodbye.